Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine Washington, D.C. on New Year's Day, 1864. It's described as, well, fearfully cold and windy, but despite that, there's this kind of surprisingly celebratory mood.
Yeah, you had the National Republican newspaper practically boasting about Union victories from the year before. Murfreesboro, Vicksburg, Gettysburg.
Exactly. They declared, "Our gallant old ship of state, with Abraham Lincoln at the helm, has weathered the gale."
Sounds pretty confident, right?
Right. But what our deep dive today uncovers is, well, beneath that surface confidence, there's this incredibly complex web of personal rivalries, intense political maneuvering, and just immense personal burdens for President Lincoln.
And all of this is happening against the backdrop of the Civil War, which is still terrifyingly ongoing. So our mission here is to explore how Lincoln navigated all that his ambitious cabinet, public opinion swings, the brutal war itself.
Hmm.
We're looking at his political genius, really.
And we're drawing heavily from Doris Kearns Goodwin's fantastic team of rivals to piece this together for you. It's that contrast you mentioned that's so striking, isn't it? The outward confidence versus the intense pressures bubbling just below.
Precisely. We really want to understand the dynamic between Lincoln and his key rivals, especially William Seward and Salmon P. Chase. How did he manage their ambitions, their, frankly, often blatant attacks?
And how was his own resilience tested? Because the war was hitting a new level of horror around this time.
And connecting it to the bigger picture, we see more than just a wartime president. We see a master politician building a very fragile coalition. We see him grappling with his own moral growth, using remarkable strategy, even when dealing with profound personal sorrow.
Which raises that huge question you posed earlier. What kind of leadership does it actually take when a nation's survival is literally on the line?
Exactly.
So let's set the scene in Washington, D.C. itself in 1864. It really mirrored these contradictions perfectly. Fred Seward, the Secretary of State's son, he noted how gaiety has become as epidemic as gloom was last winter.
Right, so you've got parties, balls, theaters, a constant whirl of social events.
Yeah, but there were different kinds of social events. The White House receptions were totally public, open to everyone. You could have like 8,000 people showing up.
Wow.
A real human kaleidoscope, as it was called. Diplomats, frontiersmen, people looking for favors. Lincoln actually called these his public opinion baths. He found them kind of renovating and invigorating, a way to connect.
That's interesting. He saw value in that chaos.
He did. But then you had the exclusive parties, the ones at the cabinet officers' homes. You needed an invitation for those, and they were highly coveted.
And the most sought after.
Yeah.
Seward's and Chase's homes, right?
Absolutely. Meanwhile, poor Mary Lincoln, the First Lady, she's struggling with just maintaining the White House itself. Get this. She had to put down these durable brown coverings over her nice French carpets because of the muddy tramp of the crowds.
Oh, wow.
And people, relic hunting vandals, would literally snip off bits of lace curtains and drapery for souvenirs.
No way. That's wild. A stark contrast indeed to the elegance you'd find at, say, a Seward or Chase party.
Totally. And that contrast kind of highlights these rivalries festering right under Lincoln's nose, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Seward, the Secretary of State, he was hugely popular. His parties were described as, most elegant, most brilliant.
What made them so great?
Well, partly Seward's own genial wit, but also his daughter-in-law, Anna. She apparently had this grace and elegance. Plus, having all the diplomats there added a certain allure. His house was the favorite resort.
Okay, so Seward's got the charm and the diplomatic crowd. What about Chase?
Ah, Chase. Salmon P. Chase, Secretary of the Treasury. His daughter, Kate Sprague, she was the star. Observed of all observers, they called her. Intelligent, politically savvy, she impressed everyone.
A real asset to him, then.
Definitely. Especially because Chase himself could be kind of frosty and extremely nearsighted. He often looked, uncomfortable and generally bothered, even at his own parties.
So Lincoln's doing his public meet and greets, but his top two guys are basically holding rival courts, with their families getting all the praise. How did Mary Lincoln handle that? You mentioned her wounded pride.
Exactly. That wounded pride really started to fester. I mean, imagine reading in the papers that Seward, not you, inaugurated the fashionable season. That had to sting.
Yeah, definitely.
She apparently continued to resent the closeness Seward had with her husband. She even told a family friend, Anson Henry, that she thought Seward was behind scandalous reports about her.
Really? Was he?
Well, interestingly, Dr. Henry actually traced those rumors more towards Chase's supporters, and this is where it gets really personal. Mary's anger towards Chase became very bitter. mainly because of his obvious presidential ambitions.
Ah, the political angle.
Right, and it all boils over in this infamous cabinet dinner incident. Mary's planning her first state dinner of the year. She's looking over the guest list from John Nicolay, Lincoln's secretary.
Okay.
And in a moment of, well, anger, she crosses out the names of Kate Sprague and her husband, William.
Ouch. A direct snub.
A huge snub. Nicolay knew it would look terrible for Lincoln, so he went straight to the president. Lincoln immediately put the names back on the list.
Good move. How did Mary react?
According to Nicolay, she went on such a rampage as the House hasn't seen for a year. It just shows you the intense personal stakes tangled up in all this Washington social maneuvering.
Wow. And yet, amidst all this glamour and tension, Secretary of the Navy Gideon Welles writes in his diary that these parties felt like merrymaking at a funeral.
Yeah, that quote really captures it, that somber undertone beneath all the forced gaiety.
That Welles diary entry, the merrymaking at a funeral line, it really hits home, doesn't it? But what's fascinating is, even with these intense political hatreds simmering, there was still this strong tradition in Washington of keeping politics and social life separate, at least on the surface.
Right, like that example with Fernando Wood. He was a Copperhead congressman,
Right.
Northern Democrat who opposed the war effort, a really bitter opponent of Lincoln's.
Yeah, not exactly friends of the administration.
Not at all. But he threw a big party, and lots of Republicans actually went. And keeping with that tradition, Mary Lincoln sent a bouquet of flowers over to Mrs. Wood. Just a courtesy.
Okay, standard practice. But then...
Well, this is where it gets tricky. The Woods apparently exaggerated the gesture. They put cards saying compliments of Mrs. A. Lincoln next to all the flower vases in their house, making it look like she'd supplied the whole massive floral display.
Oh, that's not good. How did that play out?
Predictably badly. Newspapers jumped on it, twisting Mary's simple courtesy into evidence of her having Southern sympathies.
Which must have infuriated her, given her strong Union loyalty.
Absolutely. She was stung by it and quickly wrote to General Sickles, declaring her entire innocence and saying anyone who knew her detestation of disloyal persons would know the rumor was false. It just shows how easily things could spin.
And there was another incident involving her family, right? The Martha Todd White story.
Yes, that one was serious. Martha was Lincoln's sister-in-law, and she was accused of being a Confederate spy. The accusation was that she was smuggling goods using a special pass Lincoln had granted her.
Were these passes unusual?
Not necessarily. They were granted sometimes. But false stories spread like wildfire. People claimed she defied inspection, waving the positive order of your master, meaning Lincoln in General Butler's face. Total fabrication.
How did Lincoln react? He usually ignored rumors, didn't he?
He did, but this one he took seriously. It involved his family and accusations of aiding the Confederacy. He got General Butler to confirm in writing that the story was silly and completely false.
And he used that letter.
Yes, he used Butler's letter to publicly refute the whole thing. It was a rare, direct response, but it shows how crucial it was for him to protect his family's integrity and, maybe more importantly, to make absolutely sure there wasn't even a hint he was helping the Confederacy.
These constant attacks, personal and political, must have worn him down tremendously.
They definitely took a profound toll. It's probably not surprising that around this time he showed that really uncharacteristic great vehemence with his old friend Orville Browning.
Right. Tell us about that. Browning asked for a favor.
Yeah, Browning came asking on behalf of a loyal Unionist plantation owner down in Mississippi. Her slaves had been freed by the Union Army, which was policy, but she wanted the government to basically give her an equal number of Negroes, whom she would pay as laborers.
Basically trying to replace her freed slaves with government-supplied paid labor. How did Lincoln respond?
He exploded, relatively speaking. According to Browning, Lincoln retorted that he'd rather take a rope and hang himself than to do it. He declared flatly her slaves were free when they were taken.
Wow. That's strong language from Lincoln.
Incredibly strong. Browning said he left him in no very good humor, kind of baffled by the reaction. But it really shows the immense emotional strain Lincoln was under.
And perhaps his evolving thinking on emancipation hardening his stance.
Very likely. And remember the context. Just earlier that same day, he'd visited his dying friend, Congressman Owen Lovejoy, an ardent abolitionist. Lincoln confessed to Lovejoy, "This war is eating my life out," and even shared a feeling, a premonition, that he wouldn't live to see the end of it.
That's incredibly heavy.
And then, just days later, another blow. February 10th, a fire alarm rings at the White House. smoke's pouring from his private stables.
Oh, no.
Lincoln, according to his bodyguard, just sprang over a hedge like a deer, desperately trying to help save the horses. He had a real affection for animals, and Willie's pony was in there.
Were they able to save them?
Sadly, no. 6 horses died in the fire. When the bodyguard found Lincoln afterward, the president was just standing there crying. Real tears.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. It paints such a human picture of him.
It really does. Profound personal grief. But then, get this. The very next day, he'd composed himself and was already giving officials instructions to rebuild the stables.
Amazing, that capacity to feel deeply but then immediately focus on the practical task at hand. That's resilience.
It speaks volumes, doesn't it? About his ability to compartmentalize, maybe? Or just his sheer sense of duty.
That image, Lincoln crying over his horses one minute, ordering the stables rebuilt the next, it's incredibly powerful, captures that mix of vulnerability and duty. And amidst all this, it's fascinating how he used theater as a coping mechanism.
Yeah, it really seemed to be his respite and renewal. He even had private access through stage doors.
So he could just slip into a box unseen.
Exactly. Avoid the crowds, the office seekers. One person observed that in the theater, he has forgotten the war. He has forgotten Congress. He is out of politics. It was a real escape.
And 19th century theater wasn't like, quietly sitting in the dark. It was lively, right?
Oh yeah, very communal. Innovative gaslight was making sets more dramatic. Audiences were diverse, rich folks, working class, and they were vocal participants, like at a sports event almost. Lincoln seemed to enjoy that communal feeling.
And he developed a real appreciation for it, especially Shakespeare, didn't he? Even though he hadn't seen much live theater before becoming president.
He did. He famously wrote a letter to actor James Hackett, praising plays like Macbeth. He even had preferences for certain speeches, like Hamlet's "Oh, my offenses rank," over the more famous "To be or not to be."
Did people appreciate his criticism?
Not always. He faced some public ridicule for it, but he just calmly endured it, saying he'd endured a great deal of ridicule without much malice. He understood why those plays, with all their political intrigue, burdens of power, civil strife, and loss, resonated so deeply with his own situation.
There's that great story about the actor John McDonough.
Oh, yeah. Congressman Kelly brought McDonough, who was a Democrat and thought Lincoln was just a mere buffoon, to meet the president. They ended up talking Shakespeare for 4 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah. And McDonough left completely changed, totally won over by Lincoln's intellect and depth.
It's amazing how he found that connection through literature and drama. And he saw some famous actors, didn't he? Like Edwin Booth.
He did, ironically, Edwin Booth, whose brother would later assassinate him. Lincoln and Seward apparently went to see Booth perform night after night when he was in town. Seward even gave Booth acting advice.
Seward giving acting tips. That's something.
Right. And Carpenter, the artist painting the Emancipation Proclamation scene, he observed Lincoln's unique ability to appreciate both tragedy and comedy with equal intensity. He described Lincoln's laugh as like the neigh of a wild horse.
A wild horse neigh. I love that description. It shows that release he found.
Exactly. But again, contrast that with others in his cabinet. Chase and Bates. They thought theater was a foolish waste, or even a satanic diversion.
So they didn't join him for Shakespeare.
Definitely not. There's that story of Stanton, the Secretary of War, getting so frustrated trying to get Lincoln's attention during a play that he literally pulled Lincoln's coat lapel.
And Lincoln.
Lincoln just kept his eyes on the stage, responding apparently with all the smiling geniality that one might bestow on a similar act from a favorite child, just completely absorbed. Theater was fundamental to his emotional balance.
That's a perfect point about his emotional balance, especially as we pivot now to the political battlefield, the run-up to the 1864 election. Lincoln's calmness under pressure was really tested by the presidential boomlet for Salmon Chase. Can you walk us through how that unfolded?
Absolutely. So, early 1864, you've got Chase's supporters, including some really influential figures like Jay and Henry Cook, actively pushing for him to challenge Lincoln for the Republican nomination.
How are they doing that?
Or various ways. Funding flattering biographies in, well, some rather seedy magazines, and they formed an official Chase for President committee, headed up by Senator Samuel Pomeroy from Kansas.
And Chase himself, was he encouraging this?
Oh, completely. His ambition was rock solid. He genuinely believed Lincoln was not up to the job, and he wasn't shy about saying it. He'd openly criticized Lincoln's want of energy and force to other cabinet members like Wells and Bates. He saw himself as the man the country needed.
Okay, so the groundwork is being laid. Then comes the big move.
Right. The key event was the Pomeroy Circular. This was a document distributed confidentially, supposedly, to leading Republicans. and it was harsh.
What did it say?
It basically ripped into Lincoln's leadership, claimed his reelection was practically impossible, criticized his tendency toward compromises and temporary expedience, and argued that only Chase had the necessary qualities to win the war and, save the nation.
Wow. That's a direct attack from within his own administration circle. What happened when it got out? Because these things always get out.
Exactly. It leaked to the press almost immediately, and boom, a political explosion. Huge outcry. Calls for Lincoln to fire Chase immediately.
Okay, so how does Lincoln handle this? He must have known Chase was behind it, or at least complicit. This could tear the administration apart, right?
That's the crucial question, and it really showcases Lincoln's political genius. Did he believe Chase's denials of involvement?
Probably not.
The circular's author later confirmed Chase okayed it, but Lincoln didn't lash out.
He stayed calm.
Remarkably calm. He restrained his anger. He kept Chase in suspense for weeks, basically doing nothing publicly while he waited to see how public opinion would shake out.
So he used patience as a weapon.
Precisely. It was strategic in action. He let the public reaction against the circular do the work for him. He didn't have to look like he was purging a rival. The backlash against the circular was huge, way more damaging to Chase than to Lincoln.
So the plan backfired on Chase.
Big time. Newspapers, even ones usually friendly to Chase, condemned the circular. State legislatures started passing resolutions endorsing Lincoln for renomination, including, crucially, Chase's own home state of Ohio. That was the fatal blow to his campaign.
Wow. Ohio turned against him.
Yep. Only then, with Chase politically wounded, did Lincoln respond to an earlier offer Chase had made to resign. Lincoln accepted Chase's disclaimer about his friend's actions, but then firmly stated he saw no occasion for a change in the Treasury Secretary for the present.
For the present, keeping him on a leash.
Exactly. It let Lincoln control the narrative, keep Chase's skills at Treasury, but neutralized him as a rival. Chase then withdrew from the race, trying to frame it as an unselfish move to avoid party discords.
But others saw it differently.
Oh, yeah. Attorney General Bates wrote in his diary pretty cynically, "It proves only that the present prospects of Mr. Lincoln are too good to be openly resisted. It's just a masterclass in political maneuvering by Lincoln patients, strategic in action, letting rivals implode."
Absolutely remarkable strategy. And just as this political drama is peaking, the military landscape shifts dramatically, too, with the arrival of Ulysses S. Grant.
Right. March 1864, Grant comes to Washington. He's the hero of Vicksburg and Chattanooga, and Lincoln appoints him lieutenant general, a rank nobody held since George Washington. Huge deal.
And his arrival was pretty low-key, wasn't it?
Hilariously so. He just walks into the Willard Hotel, kind of unassuming, dressed simply. The desk clerk doesn't even recognize him at first.
Seriously, the hero of the West.
Yep. It wasn't until someone spotted him in the dining room and this huge shot of welcome went up that people realized who it was. He ended up having to stand on a table just so people could see him.
Quite an entrance. What about his first meeting with Lincoln?
Also very striking. Lincoln apparently had this beaming countenance when he stepped forward to greet Grant. Porter, Grant's aide, noted the stark physical contrast, the tall, lanky president and the shorter, sort of awkward but solid general.
And Seward was involved in the introductions, too.
Of course Seward was, ever the stage manager. He apparently got Grant to stand up on a sofa in the East Room during a reception so the crowds could get a better look. Grant supposedly blushed like a girl and later called that reception his warmest campaign during the war.
Lincoln must have been thrilled to finally have a general the public embraced like this.
He was delighted. And critically, he trusted Grant had no presidential ambitions himself. He'd gotten word Grant fully supported keeping Mr. Lincoln in the presidential chair.
And Grant seemed to dislike the Washington show.
Very much so. He reinforced that man of the people image, hated the trappings of fame. He famously turned down a fancy dinner invitation with Lincoln, basically saying he'd had enough of the show business and needed to get back to the army in the field. And Lincoln's reaction. Lincoln just laughed and said it would be like the play of Hamlet with Hamlet left out. He appreciated Grant's focus. And that humble dedication, that focus, was exactly what Lincoln needed heading into the spring of 1864. It felt like, as one person wrote, the pause and hush before the coming of the hurricane.
A sense of foreboding.
Definitely. But Lincoln's faith in Grant was absolute. He wrote Grant this incredible letter expressing entire satisfaction and promising full support, no meddling.
And Grant's reply was different from previous generals.
Completely different. Stark contrast to McClellan. Grant wrote back, "Should my success be less than I desire and expect, the least I can say is the fault is not with you." taking responsibility.
That must have been music to Lincoln's ears.
Absolutely. Grant then launched his big offensive. Three main prongs: the Army of the Potomac hammering Lee, Sherman marching through Georgia, and Butler moving on Richmond. But Lincoln had this nagging fear.
What was that?
He worried that Lee, the master tactician, would select his own ground. And his fears were horribly realized in the Wilderness Campaign.
Ah, the wilderness. Just the name sounds ominous.
It was brutal, an unforgiving maze of dense woods, ravines. It completely negated the Union's numerical advantage. It turned into this hideous struggle, just a nightmare of inhumanity.
The casualties were staggering, weren't they?
Unimaginable. 86,000 Union casualties in just 7 weeks. Grant himself later deeply regretted the final assault at Cold Harbor, calling it a slaughter.
86,000 in 7 weeks. How did Lincoln cope with that level of carnage arriving right on their doorstep?
It was devastating for the city. Thousands upon thousands of wounded soldiers started arriving on steamers from the front lines, just shattered wrecks of men where even the lightest touch is torture.
The human cost made so visible.
So visible. People like Elizabeth Blair wrote about fleeing the city just to escape the constant moans of their poor, suffering men. The cabinet was in despair, talking about carnage unexampled. Lincoln's secretary, Nicolay, admitted he was more nervous and anxious than he'd been in a year, worrying about Lincoln's own solicitude.
Did it break Lincoln?
There were nights, absolutely, when he didn't sleep, just paced his room. People saw the great black rings under his eyes, yet somehow he maintained his public composure. He still attended the opera, needing that relief from this terrible anxiety.
He compartmentalized again.
It seems so. Congressman Colfax observed Lincoln showing his saddest face one moment, but then quickly recovering, expressing hope in Grant, telling stories almost to hide his own saddened heart. His faith in Grant's dogged pertinacity, his determination, never wavered.
He really believed Grant wouldn't turn back.
He clung to that belief. He supposedly embraced a reporter who brought a verbal message from Grant, saying simply, "There is to be no turning back." And his spirit soared when he read Grant's famous dispatch. "I propose to fight it out on this line if it takes all summer."
That iconic line.
Iconic. Lincoln told that story about the automaton chess plate, this machine that seemed to play chess by itself, and concluded, "There's a man in it," meaning Grant. That unwavering faith in Grant was a crucial anchor.
Which brings us right to the political culmination of all this, the National Union Convention in Baltimore, June 1864.
Right. The Republicans, rebranded as the National Union Party to attract war Democrats, gather in the midst of a civil war and in the actual din of battle, as the paper said.
And Lincoln's renomination, despite the Chase challenge earlier, it was pretty much a done deal by then.
Oh yeah, absolutely assured. Even Horace Greeley, a newspaper editor who desperately sought an alternative, had to admit, the people think of him by night and by day and pray for him. Lincoln had the public's support.
There were still some pockets of dissent, though, right? Like John Fremont?
There were. Fremont, the party's first presidential nominee back in '56, was nominated by a sort of third party of radicals and malcontents meeting in Cleveland.
How seriously did Lincoln take that?
Not very. When he heard only about 400 people showed up to Fremont's convention, compared to the thousands expected, Lincoln just wryly quoted the Bible from I. Samuel about how everyone that was in distress and everyone that was in debt and everyone that was discontented gathered around David in the wilderness, kind of dismissing them.
Huh. Always with the perfect anecdote. And he showed some shrewd political maneuvering at the Baltimore Convention itself, didn't he, with the Missouri delegation?
He did. This delegation from Missouri was full of anti-Blair radicals. They hated Montgomery Blair, Lincoln's postmaster general. They were initially pledged to Grant, basically as a protest against Lincoln and Blair.
So, potential trouble.
Could have been. But Lincoln subtly worked to ensure they were seated at the convention. He understood you had to integrate all the elements of the Republican Party, even the difficult ones. And they apparently reached a tacit agreement. They'd make their protest vote for Grant on the first ballot, then switch to Lincoln to make the nomination unanimous.
Clever. Keep the party unified, outwardly at least.
Exactly. And the convention itself really reflected how much the nation, or at least the Union side, had transformed. The platform included a resolution declaring slavery the cause of the rebellion and calling for a constitutional amendment to forever prohibit slavery.
And that got a strong reaction.
Tumultuous applause, apparently. The enthusiasm for Lincoln himself was described as terrific.
Now, the vice president selection, that had its own share of backroom dealing, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Thurlow Weed, the powerful New York political boss and a close ally of Seward's, was pulling strings. He pushed hard for Andrew Johnson,
Andrew Johnson, a war Democrat from Tennessee. Why him?
Well, Johnson balanced the ticket, geographically and politically. But Weed's main motive, according to Goodwin, was likely to protect his friend Seward's position in the cabinet. If they nominated another New Yorker for VP, Seward might have been forced out. Choosing Johnson, a Tennessean, prevented that.
Always layers within layers in politics. I love that little detail from the War Department telegraph office, too.
Oh, when Lincoln heard about Johnson getting the VP nomination before he'd officially heard about his own presidential nomination.
Yeah, he was apparently startled and asked, what do they nominate a vice president before they do a president? He called it putting the cart before the horse.
Classic Lincoln wit, even then. Later, in his formal acceptance speech, he used that famous analogy.
The swapping horses one.
That's the one, saying it was not best to swap horses when crossing streams. But he also humbly deflected praise, directing it instead to General Grant and the officers and soldiers under his command.
And he remained utterly confident in Grant, even with the presidency on the line.
Completely. There's that great story of a visitor warning him that if Grant took Richmond, the general might become so popular he'd be nominated for president himself and defeat Lincoln.
And Lincoln's reply?
Just perfect Lincoln humor and confidence. He said something like, well, if he had got to die, that was precisely the disease he would like to die of. Basically saying, Grant succeeding is all that matters.
That really sums up his focus.
It really does. So this deep dive into 1864, it just reveals Lincoln as this leader of, well, extraordinary emotional intelligence and incredible strategic patience. We've seen how he navigated the tricky social scene in Washington, the huge ambitions and attacks from his own cabinet, the constant personal slanders.
Yeah, he seemed to have this amazing ability to read the room, read the public mood. He understood coalition building, knew when to push, and crucially, when to just let things play out instead of reacting rashly.
Exactly. And all this while bearing the crushing weight of the war, which the Wilderness Campaign just illustrates so graphically. The human cost was immense right there in front of him. Yet, he kept that steady hand, that unwavering faith in Grant.
So, wrapping this up, what's the takeaway for us, looking back at this incredibly intense period?
I think it shows that real leadership, especially in truly dark times, isn't just about big speeches or bold actions. It's so much about managing complex human relationships, understanding what people are feeling, finding your own ways to cope and stay resilient.
And holding on to that vision for the future, right? Even when you're dealing with political backstabbing on one hand and just unimaginable grief and loss on the other.
Precisely. It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? What does it actually take to lead with both that sharp strategic mind and that deep sense of humanity when everything is on the line? When the path forward involves navigating rivals who want your job and sacrificing so much personally?
Definitely something to ponder. A powerful lesson in leadership under pressure. Well, thanks for diving deep with us into Lincoln's world in 1864. We hope this gave you a shortcut to understanding this crucial period and maybe sparked a few aha moments.
Hope so. Until next time.